here we are. Now, what's going on? Now, the latency is just terrible here. It's trying to stream it up here. This is amazing. This is another test. Come on, baby, let's go. Here we go. Okay, live streaming. What was it? No audio, huh? I'm sitting here looking to find out what the story is. But the delay on this is about 2 or 3 minutes, so I really have to think about what I'm doing. Anyway, this is Jimmy Doane Show here at evening. It's about 9 o'clock. Oh, I guess the Donald is going to give his speech here pretty quick. That'll be fun to watch. So at any rate, it's an exciting day, Thursday, and fortunately, I guess it'll be all over but the shouting for the convention this time. What of course is fascinating, what will be fascinating, is to listen to the various lefties and righties and everything next week on Hillary's campaign. She has not yet told us who her VP is going to be. A lot of flack, if you want to call it so, over Mike Pence, which personally, except for a couple of his flaws, I thought was a pretty good choice, because the last thing you needed was somebody like Newt as vice president because of the ego clash. And I've always said that Newt would make a great Secretary of State. Excuse me, not Secretary of State. Don't want to be there. No, Chief of Staff. And the reason he'd be Chief of Staff is that Chief of Staff, I think, could conceivably be the most powerful position in an administration. It reminds me a little bit of some of those the Disney thing where you had Jafar or Aladdin or whatever it is, and the crooked guy would whisper into the king's ear, and I mean he was really the power behind the throne. Not for a moment would Donald would succumb to anything like that. But the point is that Newt, having vast experience with the Congress on all kinds of legislative stuff, he would be the contact man. Remember now, Newt, as Chief of Staff, would be walking into the Oval Office every single morning for a briefing, and probably 2 or 3 times during the day, depending on what was happening. He'd always travel on Air Force One. And he would go every place the president did, pretty much. So the point is that he's the silent man behind the scenes. And if anybody in Congress, he'd be the ultimate gatekeeper. If anybody in the House or the Senate wanted to get anything through to the Donald, they would have to go through Newt. I mean, I don't think there's many of these guys, even the head of the head of the Senate or the head of the House, chairmans or whatever they are. I don't believe that any of those people can just walk into the Oval Office or phone up the president. I think they're going to have to go through. They're all going to have to make an appointment or be invited. You might not even be able to make an appointment. So that'll be kind of fun. So next week, of course, comes out it'll be interesting. The big guns are going to come out on Hillary. And I think that there's going to be a surprise on how, I mean, to be sure, she's got, untold millions of dollars to put this thing together, but, the best of them screw up, and, all she needs is what's his name, a Dean Scream or something, whatever it is, the guy from Vermont who did the Scream and lost, and went from, presumptive nominee to 0. So at any rate, what we're looking for over there is going to be see who's going to talk, and I'm guessing you're going to hear people, probably Elizabeth Warren is going to get a spot, but basically you're going to hear the socialists. These are the socialists are going to get a talk, and what they're going to say is give it all away kind of stuff. They are going to think that they're going to be coming from the mantra that spending creates an economy. And this is why the stimulus package, which started, the first one was in 2004, but it really ramped up in 2008. And that's why we've had 0 interest rates for the last 7.5, almost 8 years now. And they said it's going to continue. I noticed that the IRS came out and said no COLA this year. So the point is that the middle class, anybody that does any saving, those people are being decimated decimated because as their 10-year bonds or 20-year bonds bought in 96 that were paying 4 and 5% come due, now you get your money back, your $1,000 or whatever it is, and you go to invest it, and suddenly you get to invest it at 1 or 2%, which means that these people who are living on retirement income are going to be, at a loss. Now, the other thing is, I was here listening that the idea that spending creates an economy is so on its face makes no difference at all, because that's what they did with the stimulus. They pumped an extra trillion or two into the economy, and the idea is that if you give money to poor people, then they will go spend it on necessities and hence boost the economy. Well, all well and good, except for the fact that when you spend it on essentials, that stuff gets consumed. And they talk about the consumer society, the consumption society is what I call it. And then it's gone. And so you sit there, and it's not like you've made any long-term investment. What you have to realize is that when people say that 70% of the economy is in spending, consumer spending, and now it's probably up to 80 or 90% because nobody can save anything. My point is that if the savings are the one thing that allow you to build the machinery and the factories to produce stuff that you want to have, that somebody has to take a risk. Somebody actually has to spend, up to a year and a half or 2 years building a factory to produce widgets or cookies or whatever it is. And during that time, there's no income. So that is capital. That is where the capital gets used. And you have to have capital before you can have spending. There's no way around it. You just don't start a society on spending because there's nothing to consume. The only way you can produce something to consume is to have something left over after you've had your own personal consumption. And of course, this started with the agricultural revolution, when people could stay in one place, and they found ways with the scythe, or as it moved up the food chain, the reaper and stuff like that, where they could produce vastly more than they needed, and they could sell the rest to people who would do other creative things with it. That meant that they didn't have to live on a subsistence level. They could swap their labor, might be for building a house or building a factory, or for what they're thinking about as far as coming up with ideas for stuff, and a certain amount of their labor for food sustenance in order to stay alive. And they didn't have to go out every day and grow their own wheat or whatever it is. And that's what the capitalist system is. That's all it is. It's capital and it's production, and then it goes around again. But the point is, you have to, obviously, the producers have to make a profit. Obviously, it's and that's what keeps the ball rolling. Now, what happens is, a lot of times people guess wrong, and those particular little industries fail. It can be, even this day and age, a large one, but Montgomery Ward or something. As consumer tastes change, there are restructurings, and people alternately go out of work and come back into the workforce someplace else. But that's normal. Turns out that the capitalism is not only human nature, it's nature. The fact is that in evolution, in Darwinian evolution, the animals and plants evolve to be competitive, and the fossil history is littered with those organisms that didn't make it, that maybe made it for a long time. Sharks are still around, or turtles are still around, but there's when they dig up some of this stuff, they didn't last very long at all. And so far, humans have only been around here for upwards, maybe, if you guess, 100,000 years out of 4.5 billion. There's nothing to say that we're going to sit here and go on forever and ever. And what will happen is that if we are allowed to evolve, that is to say, if you get the planners and the government people and the guns out of the way, and the only guns that really matter in a society are the ones held by monopoly force and governments. If without that, we have the ability to have vast new wealth, and you only have to look at the successful, not only marginally, but even in spite of crooks and robbers and the governments and so forth, you can look at times when progress, material progress for almost everybody, for vast numbers of humans, increased dramatically over some periods of time. One of them was after Andy Jackson just got rid of the central bank, and you look at the progress in the United States from 1830 until 19, even 1920, which is after they did another central bank. And the phenomenal, there was basically almost no regulation, and what regulations they did put into have kind of backfired. Stuff like the antitrust of Teddy Roosevelt, which has been a horrible thing. But I mean, they have erected, as I said in the Declaration of Independence, a multitude of barriers to moving forward, and they think they're doing a great job. And so often, another tape I'll show which ones actually backfired. And it turns out that when government gets in there meddling, you have a gun in the equation. What happened here? Why am I not streaming anymore? Oh, hello. Did something go wrong? We've stopped moving. All right. Well, let me go ahead and quit this then, and we'll see. Let me stop streaming.